Morning, I'm Steven Sprinkle. This is MorningBit. Let's get to it. Top 3 things I think are important today for Bitcoin. The first of which is layered identity on top of Bitcoin. It's something that I've been watching for quite a while inside of Bitcoin, and I think it's a really interesting thing to look at. Because honestly, kind of an admission of mine, I lost faith in Bitcoin for a little bit over this exact topic. And the reason I did is because I saw a lot of these innovative companies coming out doing interesting things with transactions and exchanges inside of Bitcoin, but then states and governments would step in and force them to tie intimate details of identity to those various Bitcoin transactions. And for me, that made the Bitcoin currency no better than any other currency out there, in that once you can tie such intimate details to the currency, you lose a freedom of financial transactions and ultimately a level of loss in freedom of speech and ideas over that loss in financial transactions because of the regulation and taxation that's possible when you have that intimate level of identity tied to the various transactions that are going on inside of Bitcoin. And that all kind of leads me to the first story, which is basically an initiative kind of coming out of the United States government called Green List Attribute Assurance. And basically what they're trying to do is intimately tie identity to digital currency transactions. This is kind of a piece of a larger mission that the United States government is kind of progressing forward, in that various business entities share intimate transactional details about the things they're doing with the government. I'm overall against this because of the dampering it puts on freedom of financial transactions and ultimately freedom of ideas and speech, like I said before. But I'll link to a video that's actually really interesting that kind of takes into account this piece, but also gives you the broader picture of how this plays into the broader long-term goal of at least the United States and maybe of other nations, but how they're using identity sharing in the transactions that are going on to give them ultimately more power over the economy. And I think Bitcoin, this is kind of a two-sided discussion and potential positive and negative, in that Bitcoin can be incredibly disruptive and incredibly innovative inside the global economy, but the problem is if states are able to implement intimate identity tied to that, it essentially gives them even more control over the financial transactions, freedom of speech, and freedom of ideas that go on inside those geographical economies and the global economy on the whole. So it's something I'm watching really close, and it's something that my company is really pushing forward to maintain anonymity in the complete in and out of Bitcoin. So going from fiat into Bitcoin, all the transactions that occur inside of Bitcoin, and then out from Bitcoin, all of those need to be anonymous in order to maintain this freedom that's necessary for a vibrant global economy to exist. The next thing is something that I think is really cool, and it's something that I think needs to happen inside the Bitcoin economy, is that Bitcoin becomes easily transactable at retail locations. And there's a company out of Canada called CoinKite that's making basically a Bitcoin debit card. The crux of this, for me, is that it requires you to use a specific POS installed at those retail locations. Awesome idea. I think the downside is they have to have that specific machine installed in those locations. What I would love to see going forward, and which is, actually there's a broader discussion around this, and there's broader implications that I've actually seen in the things I've tried to do, is that we need to get a step where we can have Bitcoin cards that are transacted at existing POS stations instead of having to install all of these new pieces of hardware. It's a good thing for the economy overall, but I think the widespread adoption is going to happen once you have ubiquity inside of these existing POS stations. I've seen banking resistance to allowing banking accounts to be created for financial transmission companies. Basically, if you're tied to digital currencies, right now, at least inside the United States, there's kind of a blanket block against creating bank accounts for any company that's doing that sort of thing, unless you take pretty intense, capitally intensive measures to be able to create bank accounts for that. I've seen it with my company, and I've seen it with other companies as well. So it's something that's going to be a pretty big hurdle for Bitcoin, but I think if we can find a way to do it, it's going to be incredibly impactful to get adoption of Bitcoin into the mass market. And the last thing I wanted to talk about today was something a little interesting to me, in that there seems to be kind of a heavy inequality inside of the Bitcoin distribution right now. And myself, I'm a pretty I lean pretty heavily on the capitalistic libertarian side of things, in that I think early adopters should be rewarded substantially more than later adopters. But at the same time, I see some of the same financial issues that are existing inside of current fiat institutions around the world, potentially existing inside of Bitcoin, in that the distribution is so sucked up into the early adopters. And I'll read you some quotes here. The average person has 1 Bitcoin. If you own 4 Bitcoins or more, you're in the top 20% of Bitcoin holders. If you own 16 Bitcoins or more, you're in the top 4% of Bitcoin holders. So that's really interesting to me, seeing that it's kind of, 99 or 1% on the 99 is kind of holding true for Bitcoin as well, in a way. And so I'm really kind of watching this going forward to see what this will look like in the Bitcoin economy and how this is going to affect Bitcoin going forward. If so much value is sucked up into these early adopters, they're going to have to be highly dumping money into the economy, dumping Bitcoin into the economy so that it can become more easily transacted. And I might be wrong on that, but we'll just have to kind of see how this goes forward. It's something that I really want to see Bitcoin innovating individual freedoms and giving people more freedoms around financial transactions because of the decentralization and basically detachment of financial currencies and transactions out from governing institutions. I think that's going to be highly impactful for these individuals and give a lot of redistribution and freedom to individuals who didn't have it before. So give me some comments below. I'd love to hear kind of what you think around these topics. These are kind of more weighty topics inside of Bitcoin, not kind of the easy stuff I've been discussing thus far. None of it's really easy, but I would love to hear what you think about this. So like, subscribe, share it if you can. That really helps. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Hope you have a great day.